Hello everybody and welcome back to One Nerd to Rule Them All. And in today's video, we'll be having a look at some of the most ferocious weapons in Middle-earth. These weapons were wielded by elves, men and dwarves alike, but all powerful in their own right. As such, they have been separated into categories of man, elves, dwarves and so on. There will not be any particular order, as I can't rate one to be stronger than the other in my opinion. Enough rambling from me, let's get on with the video. Let's start this off with the category of man. This is not to say all of these weapons were made by this race in Middle-earth, but indeed were most famously wielded by them. We'll start with Herogrim. Herogrim in itself has no particular power or enchantment assigned to it, but it does carry quite a bit of political power. The beautiful sword boasts a golden hilt inlaid with rubies and is given only to the kings of Rohan. When Theoden's curse is removed, he is given the sword to restore his status as King of Rohan once again. He then carries the blade into battle at Helm's Deep and in the Pelennor Fields. While he met his eventual end during the later engagement, his faithful sword slew many an orc and gave the people of Rohan a symbol of hope to look up to. Moving on to the Black Arrow. The Black Arrow was a large bolt intended to be fired like a ballista. It was known for being the only thing that could pierce the scaly hide of Smaug. When Smaug first attacked in Erebor and Dale, an arrow was loosed at him. While poking a hole in his thick armour, it did not kill him. When the dwarves later retook their kingdom, and Smaug let loose upon Esgaroth, the arrow was recovered by Bard the bowman. He then improvised a giant bow of sorts, and loosed the arrow at Smaug once again. This time it struck true, finding the hole in the dragon's hide and piercing his heart, ending his terrible reign once and for all. Perhaps it's slightly anticlimactic, but in all fairness, it happens the same way in the book and in the film. Now moving on to Narsil/Anduril. Narsil was the sword originally wielded by the kings of Númenor. During the siege of Barad-dûr, Isildur famously took the blade off of his father's body. It was then broken by Sauron. However, Isildur used the remains of the sword to slice the one ring off of Sauron's finger, defeating the Dark Lord. Narsil was then reforged by the Elves of Rivendell into Anduril, the Flame of the West. This sword was given to Aragorn, who was the heir to Isildur's line. The sword boasts quite an impressive amount of power. Not only does it hold political power, as many recognise it as belonging to the future king of Gondor, but it also holds the power to command the army of the dead. The Bow of Bregor, an heirloom of the House of Beor that was lost when Númenor sank. The Bow of Bregor was once kept next to other famous treasures, like the Ring of Barahir and the Axe of Tuor. Only the ring survived the catastrophe, and it would pass down through the ages until Aragorn gave it to Arwen Evenstar as an engagement ring. The Bow of Bregor was used by its namesake, an early leader of Man and an ancestor of Aragorn, in the Battle of the Sudden Flame, where he also fell. Dramborleg. As fearsome as Balrogs are, there are still several weapons in Tolkien's Legendarium with the power to slay them. The battle axe of Dramborleg is probably the most famous in this regard. This axe was the signature weapon of Tuor, who was appropriately recognised as a hero among the human race. It is unknown which race is responsible for forging Dramborleg. Regardless, the weapon is one of superior design, and responsible for performing feats that will be considered superhuman. With this weapon, Tuor had slain not just one, but several Balrogs. Even Gandalf with his blade Glamdring was barely able to fight off just one. Even after he vanquished it, the toll of the battle caused him temporary unconsciousness. Though Dramborleg was lost following the downfall of Númenor, it remains one of the greatest weapons of all time. Now moving on to the Elves. The Bow of the Galadrim. Legolas received the Bow of the Galadrim from Galadriel, right before the Fellowship departed from the realm of Lothlorien in the Fellowship of the Ring. This weapon has much more to offer than its sleek appearance. The bow's length, range and power are far superior to any ordinary bow. Moving on to Angelos. Angelos is the weapon of Gil-galad, the High King of the Noldor. He wields a glaive, a weapon that looks like a cross between a sword and a lance. Gil-galad's fearsome blade loosely translates to sharp ice in Sindarin Elvish. Moving on to Anglachel, Iron of the Flaming Star. This is a cursed sword from the time of Melian and King Thingol. This ancient sword only appears in the Silmarillion, and it's deeply connected to many of the tragedies that befell during the reign of King Thingol. Anglachel was made from the ore reclaimed from a meteorite, which is where it got its name. The sword was forged by an elf named Ol, and he had a reputation in the court of King Thingol for being a brilliant craftsman, but a bitter, isolated person. This sword had a tragic history, and when it was reforged, it was renamed Gurthang, Iron of Death. It only seems right to continue with Gurthang. The reformed blade, named Gurthang, was subsequently used by Turin Turnbar. Due to the blade's ebony hue, its wielder became known as Momagil, the Black Sword. Turin and Gurthang are responsible for some of the great achievements during Middle-earth's First Age, including the slaying of Glorung, the father of dragons. Unfortunately, Turin later killed himself with Gurthang. There is a prophecy that marks the second coming of Turin Turnbar, when he will use the Black Sword to end Morgoth's reign of terror once and for all. Moving on to Ringil. Although it never appears in either the Lord of the Rings or the Hobbit trilogies, the book depicts Ringil as possibly one of the most powerful elven blades ever created. Its wielder was Fingolfin, one of the High Kings of Noldor. It was this very weapon that wounded Morgoth. He was so powerful that there were very few weapons in existence capable of wounding him in battle. However, in a decisive moment of his duel with Morgoth, Fingolfin forced Ringol into Morgoth's foot. Due to the magic imbued in Ringol, Morgoth suffered a devastating injury. Though he survived, the wound inflicted upon him by Ringol crippled him for the rest of his life. Now moving on to the weapons wielded by dwarves, starting with Orcrist. Over the years, Orcrist has earned itself many names, which include the Goblin Cleaver and Bitter. Orcrist is a very old and powerful weapon, the bane of dark creatures roaming Middle-earth. Unlike in the Hobbit film series, the book describes Orcrist like other elven swords. It glows in the presence of orcs or goblins. Orcrist's reputation is so infamous that the mere sight of it sends a horde of goblins into a fearful frenzy. According to the Great Goblin, Orcrist is responsible for claiming the lives of over 1,000 foes. Following Thorin's passing, Orcrist was placed upon his tomb, guarding him from the evil foes lurking in the dark. Moving on to probably one of my favourite weapons, Durin's axe. Also known as Balin's axe, as he was the dwarf who had last owned the battle axe before Gimli. It is actually one of the oldest weapons in Middle-earth. Forged in the First Age by Durin the Deathless, the first king of the oldest clan of dwarves, the weapon was a sign of lordship for thousands and thousands of years. Balin had found the axe when he reclaimed Moria, and taken it as his own. After his death, it laid abandoned in the chamber of Mazabul until the Fellowship came upon it. Gimli picked it up after losing his other weapons, and proceeded to carry it with him throughout the rest of his journey, and used it in the War of the Ring. Now moving on to a category that I refer to as Other. This includes wizards, hobbits, and forces of evil. Starting with Glamdring. This sword was part of a stolen hoard that was accidentally found and recovered by Bilbo Baggins. The trolls that picked up these weapons didn't know what they had, and although Gandalf had his suspicions, it took a trip to Rivendell and a consultation with Elrond to confirm that these ancient swords had the value beyond price. Gandalf laid waste with this sword for the rest of the Hobbit and throughout the Lord of the Rings, slaying goblins, wargs, balrogs, and Uruk-hai left and right. It is the sister sword to Orcrist, the Goblin Cleaver. Moving on to Sting. Bilbo gives this glowing blade a name after he uses it to survive the spiders of Mirkwood, and the sword serves him well. Later on, it would be a valuable and powerful weapon for Frodo and even Sam, and these weren't even the first heroes to wield the blade. The dagger was forged in Gondolin by Elves in the First Age. According to some legends, the original owner of this sword, eventually known as Sting, was none other than Glorfindel, a famous hero who was returned to Middle-earth by the Valar after dying in the First Age. Moving on to the daggers of Westernese. The adventure in the Barrow Downs is often left out on the on-screen adaptations, but the detail is important in the books because this is where the hobbits get their first weapons. Tom Bombadil saved the hobbits from a wraith, and they took its daggers as loot. Frodo's is destroyed in the fight with the Witch King, but the other hobbits kept theirs for the rest of the adventure. Merry's sword was able to hurt the Witch King because it was made by the Dunedain in ancient times to fight the Angmar. These swords remained unnamed, and only one was ever really tested, but the fact that it mortally wounded a Nazgul goes to show how powerful it must have been. On the other side of this, we have the Morgul blades. Morgul blades are particularly cruel weapons used by the Ringwraiths. The swords can only be used by the Wraiths and disintegrate in the hands of another. But that isn't their primary attribute. Their main effect is a devastating and unique poison. Any small scratch suffered by the blades activates a necrotizing poison that spreads throughout the body, slowly resulting in death. This agonizing process can only be cured by elvish medicine. However, even that is imperfect. Even if one were to survive the wounds, the victim would feel intense pain in that spot wherever the Ringwraith came near, regardless if the wound was fully healed. This is shown to happen to Frodo, who is stabbed by the Witch King, and he continues to feel pain for the rest of his life. Finally, we have the One Ring. The One Ring is by far the most formidable weapon in Middle-earth, at least until its destruction in the fires of Mount Doom. This plain piece of jewellery contains enough power to level mountains, as it bears the spiritual essence of Sauron himself. In fact, the Dark Lord's fate is bound to this golden weapon. Sauron perishes along with the One Ring, never again to haunt Middle-earth. Average individuals cannot wear this ring without suffering a range of harmful effects, but at least it makes them invisible to the naked eye. Despite its fundamental role in the story, the One Ring's full power and potential remains as mysterious as ever. And this brings us to the end of today's video. Of course, there are many more weapons used in Middle-earth that are not on this list. That is not to say there are any less powerful though. If you enjoyed this video and like content like this, then might I suggest watching my most powerful creatures in Middle-earth video that you'll find on my channel. And please subscribe so you don't miss out on any future content like this. Down in the description below, you will find a link to my partner Rothmer's channel. So if you enjoy MMOs, action RPGs and streams, then please feel free to check that out. But I also have another link to another YouTube channel. It's a joint channel with me and Rothmer called Nerdy Miniatures, where we will showcase all things Warhammer. So if that interests you, then please check that out also. Anyway, that'll be it from me. I hope you have a wonderful day or night wherever you are in the world. As always, bye for now.